And welcome to Homeschool Connect Expo. We are live. It's July 1st. I cannot believe we are in the second half of 2021 already, but we are. So, welcome. We are finishing up our online learning month of June. And we've got someone special coming in to talk about their virtual school. And then later on today at 4 o'clock, we will jump into our July, our language arts fair that's going on for the month of July. But this works out perfectly because it's both. So anyway, the all the links are down below to get everywhere, to Homeschool Connect Expo, to get everybody's booth. And so if you're watching live on the two Facebook places and then YouTube, ask your questions, and it all comes right into here, and we can ask that at the end of the presentation. But let's go ahead and get started and get moving. But thanks for joining us, and I think you're going to enjoy this. This is a really cool little thing here coming up. So this is Jason. He's with Apex Learning, and before we get started and kind of going into, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Apex?
Perfect. Well, thanks for having us, and thanks for letting us participate in this conversation. My name is Jason Mitchell. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Apex Learning. It's a vague title, but basically it means that I get to work with different types of organizations, families, schools, any type of organization that supports students who are in virtual and blended environments. I love my job. I get to create opportunities for students who may not be traditional in a traditional classroom environment. And we have kids to come to us for every reason. So really exciting opportunities for students, and I'm just excited to be part of that. So just a quick overview of Apex. We work with digital curriculum, providing virtual and blended opportunities for students, middle school through high school, any type of course a student would need to march towards graduation. And everything from accelerated students, AP students, so students who might struggle or even need to recover some credits, and everything in between. So that's just the quick overview of Apex.
Okay, awesome. I love that, because of the virtual school. There's so many people that were emergency schooling, and they're looking for ways, and now that they're coming back around to, like, okay, we got to think about this, and I'm talking to so many people from all over the nation, trying to figure out, okay, do we just homeschool? Then they're scared to homeschool, and then, like, what do we do? And so this was a great way, because you're on, and you have you have everything. I mean, it's pretty wild. You have NCAA accreditation. You have, and what grades do you work with?
Everything 6 through 12, and we're looking to expand that very shortly, and we'll be K to 12 pretty shortly. So that's exciting.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Now I have someone that just popped on, Dr. Stacy Adamek.
Yeah. Dr. Stacy Adamek. She is she's on my team. She's so great. She actually ran a virtual school for the last 8 years, and then when she retired from her school district, she joined my consulting team, and she helps districts, and both of us help them, like, build the vision and then a plan towards executing that vision. It's super fun.
Okay, awesome. Let's bring her on.
Great.
Hey, how are you?
Hi there. Hi, Sam.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We were just kind of getting to know Jason a little bit. Why don't you? He already told us a little bit about you, but why don't you introduce yourself? And
okay, I'm Stacy Adamek, and I'm the national consultant for Apex Learning. And I spent 30 years in education, being a science teacher, a teacher specialist, an assistant principal at the high school level, a science curriculum specialist for a district, and eventually principal of a virtual school that served over 2,000 students a year. So Excited to be here with you guys and talk about helping kids.
Yes, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, we're just kind of going through a little bit about Apex and what a perfect timing to have Apex for everybody that's just scrambling around trying to find. I was even talking to a Hollywood producer, and he was like, okay, we did the emergency schooling, but we don't have much time to homeschool. But then what do we do? And I'm like, there are virtual places out there that can help you with everything. With your kids and he was looking forward to it. So I was just texting him and telling him to get on, to learn, to see more about Apex.
Yes.
So
yes.
Right.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you actually brought up the emergency remote learning and then the transition to virtual school, because those are two very different experiences. Yes. and for people who are homeschooling or thinking about homeschooling, we want to just be very clear that emergency remote learning was a stopgap and a largely ineffective one. Most districts transition to that sometimes overnight, sometimes with only 1 or 2 weeks planning, and they didn't have the infrastructure, the training. I'm not disparaging districts at all.
No.
They did a Herculean task overnight, but they weren't built for virtual learning. We've worked with students who were in the virtual programs, like Stacy's students, who during remote learning, they just did exactly what they did every day. They didn't see any difference in their schooling and their education. So I'm glad you used those terms, emergency remote learning, because this experience will be different for students. And I think that's a real important distinction.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and they did. I mean, a lot of them, they weren't ready. They were trying to do school as usual, but remotely. Yeah. And there's so many frustrations, and some of them, they're going to switch over to something because they got to know their kids a little bit more, and then the kids started shining. So maybe there was some bullying or something going on. Maybe they didn't fit perfectly in the square peg, to where something virtually, where people are trained to teach virtually, like Apex, is going to be perfect. And then they have that homeschool part or that home part. And so that's why I love being able to, because homeschooling and new virtual schooling looks different for almost every family, and every person and everything. So that's why I love that you guys have that thought of, we do it differently, and this is you're trained to do it virtually. There's a different way of doing it instead of this emergency remote. So good.
Even the way you design curriculum is different. So I'll show some examples of that as we walk through the conversation today.
Okay. So. Perfect. Now you have something to share with everybody that we can kind of go through. And
I do. My thought is sometimes stories of students help tell the story of especially for somebody who doesn't have that sort of mental model of what a virtual school looks like. I mean, it's kind of this nebulous concept. You're like, what are they doing? How do they spend their day? So I thought I'd tell a story of a couple students who've gone through virtual learning, and I was going to start with this little guy right here. So this guy, his name is Charlie. He's such a cool kid. He was an 8th grader in 2019, and he loves hockey. He's all hockey all day, every day. And he was actually, when he was in 8th grade, he was playing on the high school's on the high school team. So he's wow. Good. And what was interesting about Charlie is during the emergency remote learning, his school transitioned. He had been in a traditional brick and mortar school system, and I'm like, "Hey, Charlie, how's school going for you?" And he's like, "Terrible." He goes, "I have 30 different apps I'm supposed to log into, and I don't know my passcode for any of them, and this is dumb." Those are his words, so I'm not crazy. He goes, this is dumb. So my friends and I, we're all just gaming. And so it's, the guy to his right is his hockey coach. It's also Charlie's dad. And he's also, the guy to the right is also my brother. So it's funny. I have a strong family connection on this. So, you know, I call my brother, I'm like, Aaron, this is not working for Charlie. So it was interesting. As the school year went along, we got out of emergency remote learning, and Charlie went into a virtual school, or Charlie's school district went into a virtual school. And it was interesting because he started doing a little bit better. And what really engaged him is that he could spend more time focused on hockey. And his schedule wasn't dictated by a regular bell schedule. His schedule was dictated by his ability to train and to play hockey. And so my brother calls me, Aaron. He calls me and he says, "All right, we're going to homeschool Charlie, and we want to make sure that he has all the tools that he needs to be successful. We want to make sure that he's in NCAA approved programs. We want to make sure that he's academically successful, but Charlie wants to play hockey and he wants to go all the way. And we need to create an environment that's possible." And I was like, all right, you're talking to the right guy. This is exactly what we do. So it's kind of lucky that Aaron had a brother who worked in this industry, but I think it was really helpful for him. And it's cool to see Charlie and Aaron, like, Charlie's excited and he's like, yeah, this is great. Like I can focus on a lot of hockey. I can also get my schoolwork done, but I do it on my time. And it's neat to see education work for students when they have flexibility, when they have options, when they have an environment, and even a goal that they're ascribing to. So I thought that was a good way to start it, because that's, I think, where a lot of parents are. Aaron's neighbors, we're good friends with them. So their kids in virtual environments, I mean, they were thriving. And so they're also going to homeschool their students. And they said, this is great. Like, as a family, we can travel, we can give them rich experiences, we can do all sorts of things with our kids that we couldn't do before. And I mean, and not only that, their parents also have a very clear insight as to what their child is experiencing and seeing every single day. And it was funny. I was talking to one of the dads, and he goes, I finally have like transparency of my child's school world. And he goes, every day before we hit the submit button, he goes, I go through and I verbally check with my child, like, do they understand this? Do I need to spend more time with him? And he goes, I never had that before in a traditional classroom environment. So I thought that was just a real eye-opening experience for parents. In their level of engagement and their level of transparency of their child's performance on there. So as Sam mentioned, we work with students who have a variety of different reasons for coming to us. Last year alone, we worked with like 3.6 million students. So this is not our first rodeo out there. I promise. We're seasoned experts in this field. And we actually started by providing remote learning options for students in rural environments. And the only reason that I tell you that is that when you're designing curriculum and instruction to teach students in a virtual environment, you design it totally differently. And so taking the regular textbook that was used in a traditional classroom and bringing it into a homeschooling environment or a virtual learning environment, that doesn't translate well. It doesn't work well for a lot of students. And so you have to be really intentional about the way that you design curriculum. And I'll show a little bit about what that looks like and how that supports students in there. So as Sam mentioned, we are NCAA approved for our curriculum, but we also have a strong partnership with the College Board. So any advanced placement courses, I worked with I spoke with a young girl 2 weeks ago. We were hosting a conference, the Digital Learning Annual Conference in Austin, Texas. And I had a whole panel of students, and these kids were amazing. So the student's a senior. He spends part of his day in his traditional high school and the rest of his day in a virtual option where he's been taking all these AP courses, and he's taken like 10 of them. And it's just really neat to see what students can focus on if we give them the sort of the freedom to do it. We also have very strong partnerships with Cognia and Advanced Ed for accreditation. So know that your child, no matter what they're enrolled in an APEX course, it's going to be accepted wherever they go, whether it's Harvard or the community college or into the military. Those are really important pieces on there. And then options for your child. We've got everything that a student would need. Every content area: math, science, social studies, language arts, world languages, career and technology, coding, like all music appreciation, wow. Anything your child might want to enjoy, and that may be sort of out of your area of expertise as a parent. And so during that digital learning conference, I had the panel of students, but I was also talking to the parents, and I'm like, tell me about your experience homeschooling your child. And they were like, well, it was a little easier in the earlier years, and then they started getting to some more advanced courses, and I didn't know how to support them anymore. And so they work really closely. The parents work closely with the virtual teachers and the student, and those three, they've got this really strong sort of student success team that makes sure that children are successful in this course, or in all their courses. And it's neat. So I see students who they'll take the classes in the way that works best for them. So some of them, instead of taking 5 or 6 classes a day, they'll take 2 classes. Maybe they'll take algebra, and then they'll take something that's a little less intensive, and they'll stack them up, and they'll do them in like a 6-week block. So they can, they're not constrained by seat times. They're constrained by how they're not constrained at all, actually. Yeah. There's no time and pace. They just have to demonstrate mastery on there. So a lot of my students, they won't have as many classes. They'll just do a few classes, but they'll get them done a lot faster. So Sam, I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions, or if you have any comments, or even if Stacey wants to chime in as well.
Yeah, so far I texted the one gentleman. I told him he should get on later on and talk to us. No, I love with Apex and the virtual learning. I think part of the people's worry of homeschooling is those later years, because for, when you get an older child, you've been out of school for a while, and unfortunately you don't learn or remember calculus as much, or you might not remember some of these things if you don't do them all the time. And right. And that's the worry, and that's the worry part of it. And I love having Apex as the ability to take that on, because it is so good. From some sports and traveling, and that's why we started homeschooling, was traveling. And now we had the little DVDs way back when we were teaching our kids or whatever. And so, but so I still had to do all the side things. I didn't have a teacher I could fall back on to. And I would have loved to have Apex with us, because it would have given us that extra freedom, but we traveled, and they got to see when they were learning about Gettysburg, we were there. And when they were learning about this, we were there, and we had those life experiences. And, it does help learning, and that loving to learn of loving. Anyway, it's been a long day so far.
Creating lifelong learners. They'll never forget that experience, right? They're like, I remember not just the lesson around Gettysburg, but I was there. I felt it. I
Right.
saw it. We talked about it. Like that's that type of real hands-on learning. It has a deep impact on a student's comprehension and retention of that.
Yeah. And with the sports, I mean, give them that freedom to keep going on into the sports and going in, because I mean, everybody looks at these athletes and the Olympians and they're like, oh man, that's awesome. Unfortunately, those kids, those I'll call them kids. They seem like kids to me. Some of them are pretty young. But I mean, they're training all the time, so they can't be in a traditional schooling. So most likely they're virtual schooling, tutoring, or homeschooling, or whatever. To get to that point, but that for giving them that freedom to go an artist, and that was an artist to be able to math might just block out their entire day. They might not be able to function afterwards if they do too much math or whatever. To be able to have that freedom to, okay, I'm going to do it this here, and then I'm going to be done for the day.
Right.
So that's a nice way to be able to do something like that. But
yeah, it's funny. I see. So I was talking with some of the parents when we were at that conference, and one mom in particular, she goes, we're very structured. We have a routine. It's by 8 o'clock. The girls they're in the office. They're studying their classes. They follow not a traditional bell schedule, but it's more like block scheduling on there.
Okay.
And she goes, today's a Tuesday and we're at a conference in Austin, and we're also going to go speak to the state legislature and talk about some of the bills that they're discussing around virtual learning options. And I mean, you think about, so these two young girls, I'm so amazed. I mean, they were so poised and they were so elegant, and they said, when we meet the legislators, this is what we ask them. We tell them our experience. We tell them how the bill will either positively or negatively impact our lives. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's talk about understanding the the legislative system, and how you could have a voice and impact change on that. I'm like, those kids are, man, they're learning more in that day and that experience than I know that I learned in any civics class. So just really cool opportunities for students.
Yes. Yeah. I did have a question here. Let me get to it. Now you had said, AP courses as well.
I did. And that's funny that you bring that up. So the students who actually took our AP courses, they have ended up outperforming students across the nation on the AP exam. For those that scored well, in general, they outperformed them, but especially for those who scored a 3 or higher, they outperformed across the entire nation. And I think what that is, it's a testament to is that students, they're not just sitting behind a computer. They're not just watching YouTube or Khan Academying their way to learning. Like they're learning it. They're retaining it, and the AP exams, you have to be able to apply that and communicate it. It's really challenging. So I think that's it's a good little point of efficacy about the students, and that they're actually learning at a really high rate, and that they're retaining it. So.
Okay. Is that what you're seeing, Stacy? That they're able to take that lesson, that thought, and it, a lot of people would say, well, is it the teacher to student ratio? Well, yeah, that's probably part of it. I mean, are there other things that, this way of learning really tapping into something that the public schools or schools of doing it traditionally just might not be able to?
Yeah, Sam, I led teams of teachers who were evaluating different types of digital curriculum that students from all different situations would be accessing. And one of the things we really paid attention to are what kind of supports and scaffolds are built into these courses. So our students, parents are so important in helping students set their bases, their expectations, their commitment to learning. And then there comes a point where the student needs to develop some independence. And so when you build in these scaffolds and these supports into the courses and students learn how to access them, they learn a lot about their own learning, and they learn how to retain information so that they can pull it forward later. And that's just so important. And that was something we really looked for in the courses and helping students grow and develop, and moving on from having a lot of support to less support and being able to advocate for themselves and their learning. So we really look for those things in the courses, and we found them in the Apex courses, which is why we use them.
Okay. All right. Well, and that probably, is a reason why, they're scoring better in AP classes.
Yes.
and they're going on to college and probably, blowing everybody else out of the water as well, because they already have learned what you have to do in college as well, is how to find that information, how to research, how to, retain. And it's not just memorizing, for a test.
Right. It's that structure of learning how to learn.
Yeah.
And when you have the opportunity to see a lot of constructs and support systems, you figure out which ones work best for you. And that's what we loved about the Apex courses, that we had some students who gravitated towards some of the resources and not others, while other students chose the ones those students didn't pick, to help them develop their skill set and their construct for the content. So I think that's super important for someone to look at when they're looking at digital resources.
Okay. Very nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Dr. Adamek, her program, it started kind of smaller, and she really grew it out and just supported students in a virtual environment for a whole host of reasons across her entire county. And that was, students who are high performing, students who might have struggled, students who were everywhere in between. And I think
coming back to school after 2 years of being gone and deciding that was not a good decision. I need to come back and get my high school diploma. And, kids who are doing high level internships in the government or with businesses who aren't going to school all day because they have this amazing opportunity. I worked with kids across that entire spectrum with these courses. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Her program was just so phenomenal. I'm so lucky that she joined our team.
Thank you.
All right. Very good.
One of the things that we saw, Sam, that as people were thinking about what are some of the essentials when it comes to homeschooling students or providing learning in a remote or a virtual environment. And it's interesting because we've already sort of touched on a few of those things that were essential components. And I think one of them was just making sure that the kids are okay. And I think especially during the emergency remote learning, students who were home and their parents got to connect with them on a really regular basis. And I think that, like for Charlie, my nephew, and my brother, Aaron, Aaron he's like, Charlie, are you okay? Tell me how you're feeling. Are you stressed out? And normally that engagement was done a lot at the school. And Aaron always checked in with his child. I don't want to say that he abdicated that, but he and Charlie formed this really strong bond while they were there. And so, as tumultuous as that environment was, Charlie felt safe. And I think that feeling of safety for Charlie allowed him to pivot and start focusing on his academics and stop gaming and really continue learning. He's so funny. He's the coolest kid ever. I just love it. But I think that was really important for my brother and his wife to do that sort of continual check-in, like, hey guys, how are you feeling today? Things you want to talk about. So homeschooling wasn't just the the academic portion, like you need to finish this assignment. It was attending to a greater set of needs on there. And I think also giving Charlie the opportunity to have some voice in what he did and how he spent his time. Because Charlie was like, all right, well, I want to play hockey in the morning, and then, I want to have a block of studying in the afternoon, and then one late at night. Like, he's a night owl. And his parents said, you know what, that's fine. Like, this is what you have to get done. And so he would do a little bit in the afternoon between training sessions, and then he'd do a lot in the evenings. Wow. 2:00 in the morning, you'd see his usage go out crazy. And my brother's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we're doing this right with our son. And like, what, Aaron, it's he's learning.
It's working for him.
Yeah, it's working for him. And I just thought that, I'm like, it's okay, just trust it. And you see like this, I see Charlie just leaning into not only hockey, but also his learning on that. And I think that's it's different from how it's been in the past.
Yeah.
So, some of the other things that we see that are really important when it comes to the sort of the curriculum and instruction side of the equation, is that it has to be relevant for students. If they don't see why they're doing what they're doing, or if they don't see the application in that. And you had such a great example, Sam, with taking your students to Gettysburg. Like for so many kids who, like, history is just this abstract concept, and they're like, I don't know, that was like 200 years ago. They don't care until they're involved in that environment and that relevance. And I think homeschooling in particular gives parents the opportunity to do and provide those opportunities of real world application and examples for their children.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're seeing in the virtual and the digital, is we've got these kids who, unlike me, I live in this virtual world. I live in digital world, and but I didn't have that growing up at all. I mean, we didn't have, computers till the very, very end of my high school. Did we ever like really see a computer, and the internet was something brand new. I was in the business world, and, but these kids have it everywhere, all the time, all the digital, all the videos, all the information overload. And then they go to school and they see a book, and the illustrations are probably 40, 50 years old, and there's like this huge thing that they just don't get. I can have all these other videos and all these people and all these interviews, or I can stare at this book and recite something, that even though history, but when in a digital environment, you get to see it differently. You get to see that part and add more things to it, which I think brings things alive a lot more than just a simple remember this, right, this illustration way back old.
When we think about, the very basic levels of learning, and you think about just the transfer of knowledge and information, those are pretty basic things. And computers, they're actually really well poised to transfer information to students. The higher level learning, sort of that synthesis, that analysis, that critical thinking skills, those often come with the type of experiences and interactions that you just talked about. And so when your example of Gettysburg was perfect, because for a lot of students, they just read a page in a textbook on Gettysburg, and they have no connection to it, no real understanding of that. But walking your kids through that, like giving them the context, like, all right, these are the facts. This was the time, this was the period, this was what was going on in history. So, you're teaching social studies, you're teaching civics, you can include some math in there. But what your children walked away with was a deep understanding of the whole context of that environment. And that's what's activating those higher level thinking skills and that critical thinking and analysis. And that's ultimately the goal of what we're trying to educate our students to do, right? Is to train that muscle that they've got up there to become effective thinkers. And so I think, smartly coupling instruction with experiences is just such a fantastic way to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's what virtual and digital can do, because I mean there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of information, and then they're talking to a teacher that they might not ever meet, from somewhere else that has a different perspective and a different thought, and they have that ability to go out and do things that even if they don't travel, but they might be able to experience or intern or help out a neighbor and help, and then it just hearing their stories, and that's one of the other things we did for our kids is everywhere they're at, we were just telling them, grab someone and just talk to them, and the World War II Museum down in Louisiana, I was like, anybody that works here or is helping, just grab and just ask questions, let them tell you, the history, because that's a resource we're not going to have very much longer. So just grab them, and really, let that sink in, and those conversations and the kids and, and I think that's what we can do, on a virtual standpoint, and especially if the kids really get it, if they really get into it and see it, and and their friends, all of our kids' friends, they wanted to homeschool, they wanted to do the stuff because they were just tired of sitting there and just kind of going through the motions, and they were just memorizing for tests, and they weren't really learning or learning how to learn, and then they get to college and they're just blown away when they go to college, of the difference, and they're almost not being able to handle, some of these students, they're just not ready for it. They don't get it. They don't have it, so.
Right. Those executive thinking skills. And Stacy spent a lot of time in her programming, sort of developing a framework so that students did enhance their thinking skills. Like Stacy, what were some of the strategies that you and your team would employ when it came to giving them either experiential learning, or you mentioned the internships and things like that?
Well, part of that is really taking time to assess where a student is. And that's what's really unique and very cool about the virtual environment is, teachers, it seems somewhat counterintuitive, but they actually can get to learn students' mindsets and their abilities very well. And so, what we would work on is talking about making a plan and actively involving a student in that plan as to here's where your skills are now, and here's where we think they would like to be, having the student interact with that, and then say, okay, here's our plan for helping you get there. So I think being very deliberate and bringing the student into the conversation and helping them learn about their own pattern of growth and how they may be able to advance themselves is something they can take with them anywhere they go. And so just kind of really engaging them and involving them in that development of their executive skills and making them aware of what they are and how they can improve them. So having teams of adults, including parents, or if you're working with, a resource center or a place you're going to learn, like museums and things, they also have some ideas for how to do that. So I guess that's what I would speak to, Jason, on that.
Yeah. That's so interesting. That executive skill development is just so important. Sam, what from your perspective, what do you think about that?
I think that's one of the things that we can, that's the ultimate goal is to try to figure out how to get the kids on their level. We fostered a ton of kids. We had like 19 kids come through our house, and they all had these what was it, IEPs, and I kept on thinking, I'm like, man, why don't they have this for all the students? Because they allowed the foster kids to kind of come in and like talk about what they liked, what they didn't like. I'm like, this is this is wild, and it was almost like they were using them as a punishment. But I'm like, every kid should go through this to sit down and talk with their teachers and their people and figure out what they want from their education, and to make it not individualized, because I know schools can't, but I think that's the beauty of homeschooling and virtual, and is that individual attention by still going through a study of a program and having people, kind of let the kid kind of understand, and give them a little bit of that control, like your nephew, of like 2 o'clock in the morning, let's do it. let's take a class, and one of my kids, I mean, they wouldn't have even been able to stay up until 2. The other one's like 2 o'clock. That's early, and so all three of my kids are like so different, and everything. But I think that's the beauty of digital and virtual learning, to be able to tap into those things, and that's what people were seeing with that emergency remote. They got to know their kids more. They got to see their kids differently. They, a lot of them started shining, when they got home, and I think that's the biggest thing I've been hearing of, like, my kid, we have a conversation now, instead of just like, I don't want to talk to you, and it had nothing to do. It just was so much stress and so much stuff going on, and they had no control, and that's why a lot of them go on to gaming or go on, because they control every single thing, and they just are like sinking in, where the only thing that they can control, and by doing it this way, it gives them that ability, and gives them, those little wins, of man, I was able to do this. I picked this, and I was able to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And man, I got to learn that. That was easy. And those little wins just keep on building upon themselves. And to have the teacher and the parent both be able to be there, ready to help when when they need it, is key, because that's what we do in business. That's what we do in life. That's what we do, everywhere else. But somehow, we try to teach it so differently, and it just doesn't translate very well. And I think that's why the scores are going higher in the virtual, digital, and homeschooling, and that's why, my kids are in the workforce, and they're asking, how can we get more kids like you? How can we, like, and they're like, just bring some homeschoolers, I guess. Because I'm like, they just, they're the way they think and how they do the stuff, and is different even in the workforce, and so that's the beauty of it. But I do have another question that popped up, because we keep on talking about teachers being there through Apex. Is there a live teacher or a teacher helper that they can get to with a click of a button, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we offer a little bit of both, and what we offer opportunities for students to learn sort of at their own time, their own way, their own pace, and there's instruction that's embedded within the content already. But we've also we put in regular check-in hours for our teachers, so that they're checking in with the student, they're making sure that they're on track. Let's say a student completes a quiz and they didn't do very well, the teacher's going to check in and say, hey Sam, you got a 50 on this. Let's talk about some of your answers. Let's talk about some of the places that you struggled. So there's lots of checkpoints. There's also lots of transparency for the parents in that equation. So the parents, the teacher, and student are all in constant communication as well. So okay. it's a whole support team that keeps the students on track, and making sure that they're apprised of exactly how the students are doing. There's also support, if we have office hours, and if students are struggling and their regular teacher's not there, they can just call in and say, hey, can you help me with this algebra problem? And they'll help them out too.
Okay.
So
okay, yeah, very nice. Okay.
Sam, something that I hear a lot of homeschool parents that they're concerned about, if they're thinking about making the transition, and that's the socialization skills of their child. Like, they're concerned that their kids aren't going to develop those skills if they're
Yep.
homeschooled. And I
Yeah.
wanted to spend a second on that. It was interesting. So I was talking with this panel of students who were speaking, who were being homeschooled, and their parents and I were sitting back at the table, and one of the moms leaned over and she goes, "How's this for social skills?" She's like, "My kids are up there speaking to 100 people live, and they're also speaking, they have an online component of that as well." And she's like, later on, they're walking the halls down in Austin, and they're going to talk to the legislators. And I think what we see is that when students are homeschooled, that their parents are engaged in those conversations. And you hit the nail on the head when you said you would coach your child, like, go grab an adult in the museum and talk to them and get information out of that. We just don't see a degradation of socialization skills for students that are homeschooled. I mean, like, we see, if anything, I would say we see an enhancement, because students are used to engaging with people, to interact with them, to learn from them, and they're going to them for help, and they're comfortable in that environment. And I think that that is definitely something that we hear from parents who are concerned about that. And that's something that I think what you'll see from your child is oftentimes there's even more opportunities for them to engage in a way that feels safe and comfortable for them, and it adds to the experience.
Yeah, and I used to answer that as yes. We don't want them to socialize sometimes with
Right.
there's a reason for that. But they do. Most of the homeschoolers that I knew and our kids knew and everything else, they were able to speak to anybody. They were able to speak to the kids. The foster kids coming in, they were able to still communicate with them and play with them and do things with them as well too. But if they needed to volunteer or whatever, our kids, the homeschool kids, are usually the first ones, so they can help out. There's a lot more. That socialization, I think, comes from what I sometimes call maybe the 8 foot of hair. Families that are back 30, 40 years ago, when they first started homeschooling, they were doing it for a whole nother reason. And that, and they were, I don't know, they were not trying to be Amish, but they were trying to be as far removed from society as possible. And I think that was the beginning of what people think through of homeschooling are those that were very socially awkward, but they were going to be socially awkward no matter what. Unfortunately, some of those, a couple decades ago, but now, especially in the digital age and, in the digital world that we live in, they can have friends of same common things, online, through gaming, through all the other things.
Right.
They don't have to be sitting beside each other, to speak to one another. And one of my kids was a car guy. And so he was able to, literally go and talk to anybody about cars. And he got to know all kinds of people. And I think the socialization, there's so many groups and there's so many things now. And,
Right.
There's so many possibilities to get with other kids, and I think the difference is the socialization that happens is on purpose. They actually kind of have to talk to people. They have to kind of go out, and they have this thought of, that they're here and they want to be part of the community. And that's the difference, where some of the kids sometimes they just pull away from the community in general. And so I think the socialization of it now really isn't much of anything, because they're able to talk to everybody. because like you said, they almost have to in a way to talk to or learn how to talk to people. They're used to communicating, and we would go everywhere, and we were in the Adirondacks and a really nice little place, and we'd have people will come to us and like, man, your kids are so well behaved, and they're like, they actually talk to me, and they were surprised that these teenagers would talk to them, and they got to know one and a lady, and we just thought she was just an older lady. She was really nice and everything else. And when she left, she gave us a card, and she was one of the richest women in New York City, and she just I mean, it was like this wild thing, but she just sat down and just started talking to them, and she was just blown away, absolutely blown away that kids would want to know who she was, and talk to her, and not snub their nose at them, and they would always laugh at that, like, do you remember when we met that one? I'm like, yeah, just never know. You never know who you're going to run into and meet.
That's right.
But right. I think that's where the you have that freedom, to do, and I think, the virtual school and the digital school is such a great addition into the homeschool world, because it does, if you have multiple kids and you're getting to that high school age and trying to figure out college, and what to do after the homeschool is ending. That was probably our biggest struggle when it came to homeschooling our kids and what we hear about. And so I love that there's so more and more opportunities to kind of fit better inside of homeschooling, for our people and the people who come to the expo, they're just worried. It's still different, and there's still so much unknown and I just tell them, just go for it, because the resources, Apex is there, they have your back when when the kids get older, and there's so many other opportunities, for the kids.
Stacy, you worked a lot with parents on a parent orientation, and you had to sort of assuage them for some of the fears that they had about moving their student or child into a virtual environment. What were some of the things that you found to be helpful to convey to parents that helped parents feel comfortable?
Really, that partnership. That's why we needed to meet you. That's why we needed to have this conversation, so we're on common ground, so that we can support each other in helping your child reach their goals. And I think that communication piece is so important, and parents willing to learn enough so that they know how to guide their child when they're taking a virtual course. That is something that really contributes to success. Willing to know enough and how to intervene and when to ask for help from staff. So I think those things are important. And also, one of the things we discussed was, having timelines, learning how to plan your productivity. How are you going to need to communicate with others to get your job done? And really, that we just had the conversation, what happens to you in your workplace, parents? Mm-hmm. These are things you have to do. You do have deadlines. There's things you have to accomplish. And we want to work with you in this educational setting to help your child develop those skills. And so I think that's really that partnership component, and understanding that everyone has a role to play and helping that student be successful.
Excellent. I've heard you use a term before called informed support that parents have. And I thought, like, that's they have the tools, they have the transparency of their child's performance on a real-time basis, and that type of informed support, and especially with the conversations that you have up front, I think leads to a lot of success. Sam, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, having data, and when everyone has access to data for how the student is doing, it's really not someone saying you're not doing your work, or you're not doing this. It's really like, let's look at what we have here. And then the student is asked to answer questions about data that's right in front of them as well. So that's also a strength and development component for the learner too.
Yeah, so smart. That's
Yeah.
and it's just such it's so clear why your program was successful. So I just looked at the clock and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're 7 minutes into an hour. So Sam, I guess this was just a super easy conversation that was free flowing. Is there any questions that you have or the audience has that we can end up with?
Yeah, I think what we'll probably end up doing is doing another one of these, because I think it's a great conversation to have, especially for the people in that emergency remote going over to homeschool, trying to figure it all out. So maybe we can do another one where we really dive in of what your program looks like and how it works and everything else. Because those are, kind of the questions of just, but you can get everything. Everybody, all the links are down below, right into the exhibitor booth. They have some wonderful videos that talk about the school, kind of show you the programs and show you how it works. And then there's, of course, links out to the website. And the website's amazing and has a ton of details and information, for everybody on there. So but yeah, I think we should schedule another one on here. So. And that way we can really, dive in deep. But no, this has been great. This has been actually really, wonderful to kind of talking about a little the points that I love the data, because I mean that really is what the parents are looking for. And I think giving the control to the kid and the parent at the same time. Is beautiful. So everybody go out, click on the links, go out and to the exhibitor booth, out to their website, check out, ask questions. There's all kinds of information out there. But I'll send you an email and we'll get another time set up to where we can really dive in more, because I think this is great. I think this will be able to really help people decide, and give them, some extra points, reference. So.
Right. I mean, and Stacy's so great about helping people think through what are the look fors that they need to find in programs that will be beneficial to their child.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
She's always such a great expert to bring into the conversation.
Thank you,
so thanks. It's just always thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
Well, everybody check out Apex Learning and get more information. And this has been great. I'll send you an email and we'll get another one set up here this month and kind of talk some more and dive in deeper. So I love this. So.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you all. Thanks for
appreciate it. Thanks so
everybody.
much. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye, Sam.
Yeah.